And our third main topic today gets submitted to us with Aaron W., who writes, "Hey, John. In a recent article from The Hollywood Reporter about the Suicide Squad, there was a quote in the report from Warner Brothers' Walter Hamada saying that James Gunn will be back. He will be back. Where'd it go? He will be back because they have more stuff planned. This excites me as I love the Suicide Squad. Would you like to see Gunn make another DC movie? And what property would you like to see him tackle next?" All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Aaron. And yeah, of course, you guys heard me talk about it last week. Suicide Squad is everything we hoped it would be. I'm not saying it's a top, we heard some people say it's like a top 3 greatest comic book film of all time. I don't know that I'd say it's a top 3 comic book film of all time, but it's magnificent. It's absolutely magnificent. I loved every moment of this. It's not a film that's for everybody because the things that made it appeal so much to me, the visceral nature of it, the gory violence, all that kind of stuff, that's going to make it so it's not for everyone. But oh my God, was it ever for me. And I absolutely love this. Now, of course, we all know the drama that led up to James Gunn doing Suicide Squad in the first place. James Gunn was kind of Kevin Feige's right-hand man for designing and planning out the galactic level stuff for the MCU. He was, of course, doing his Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He was working on number 3. And then suddenly, 10-year-old tweets that he'd put out a decade earlier resurfaced, and a bunch of people got mad. Then Alan Horn, the dumbest move the great Alan Horn has ever made in his life. He just too much knee-jerk reaction. They fired James Gunn and parted ways with him, which caused a literal bidding war to break out in Hollywood between all the studios who were lining up at James Gunn's door, knocking on, knock, knock, knock. "Hey, Mr. Gunn, yeah, we have this dump truck of Spanish gold that we would like to give to you. Come on over to our studio and make any movie you want." And that's literally what Warner Brothers told James Gunn. "You come over here, make any movie you want. What do you want to make? You want to make Superman movie? We'll give you Superman. You want to do something different? You want to do Wonder Woman movie?" Wonder Woman was probably the one thing off limits to him because they were doing real good with Patty Jenkins. So Wonder Woman was probably the one thing that was off limits to him. But whatever you want to make. And he decided, I want to make Suicide Squad. So he turned down all the other studios, made Suicide Squad. Of course, later, James Gunn and Disney made up, kissed, and now Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is coming. And now that he's done with Suicide Squad, he's going to be now turning all of his attention to doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3. But the question has remained, what happens after that? Well, this comes to us from the folks over at The Hollywood Reporter who write the following. "Though Gunn is returning to the Marvel fold, DC Films president Walter Hamada confirmed to The Hollywood Reporter that there will be more from the filmmaker and DC in the future. Gunn is always welcome back, whatever he wants to do. He really has a vision and he's a great partner with us. Whenever he wants to come back, we're ready for him," said Hamada, who added, "He'll be back. We already have more stuff planned." And that comes to us again from DC's Walter Hamada. Now look, this to me is fabulous news. Number one, I've always loved the idea because it was kind of it's not as bad today as it was a couple of years ago. But when this all went down initially was still when it was a pretty toxic environment of the Marvel DC slave fanboys and the Marvel corporate slave fanboys and the DC corporate slave fanboys. I mean, it was really, really toxic. And then we had this director and I was like, okay, great. Now we've got this director who's done Marvel movies and is doing DC movies. It's kind of like, I don't know, the Capulets, and what's the other family name in Romeo?
The Montagues.
The Montagues and the Capulets have, marrying something to bring peace to the kingdoms and everything. But what I really love is the idea that Gunn may start bouncing back and forth. Because he's not just going to do Guardians of the Galaxy 3, guys. He's not just going to do Guardians of the Galaxy 3 with Marvel. He's going to do more with Marvel after that. And now we have Hamada saying he's going to do more with DC as well. And I personally love the idea of having a great filmmaker like James Gunn going back and forth and making movies for both properties. I think it's fantastic. After seeing what he did with DC and with Suicide Squad, I cannot wait to see him come back. And I'll tell you what else. I wasn't all that stoked for this Peacemaker series, this John Cena Peacemaker series coming to HBO Max. Oh, hell, I am now. After watching Suicide Squad, I'm like, yep, I'm on board for this. Anyway, Aaron, let me ask you this. You haven't had a chance to see Suicide Squad yet, obviously, but hearing that, the studio is so happy with this, and apparently James Gunn loved his experience working with them. What does this say to you, and what are your impressions hearing that he is going to be back to do more films with DC?
Well, if I may be so bold as to sidestep your question, only because, first of all, I do want to point out that while the Capulets and the Montagues eventually did reconcile their family squabble, it did take the double suicide of 2 teenagers in order to make that happen.
Yes.
So it wasn't
Yes,
totally happy. And it's kind of like the East Coast, West Coast. We had to lose Biggie and Tupac in order to make that happen. It wasn't exactly a happy story. And I'm actually going to let you and Greg, being that I think that you have much wider depths of knowledge about James Gunn and the entire situation. But I want to talk about something a little bit different, in that I just feel like this is such a beautiful example of, we all in our lives have a moment where something happens where either we screw up or just something happens, and it feels like the whole world is crumbling around us, and everything that we have worked so hard for is gone and has been taken away. And I obviously don't know James Gunn. I didn't talk to him in those moments when, that was coming down from Alan Horn and the entire internet was exploding over whether or not he should be, canceled forever or given another shot. I don't know what was going on in his head, but from an outsider perspective, I think it is really a nice reminder that no matter how bad things seem in the moment, you never know if that thing that caused your entire world to fall down will ultimately be the catalyst for everything that you want, all of your dreams to come true. And so, who knew that it took this resurfacing of old tweets and Alan Horn making a snap decision for all of Hollywood to realize that they all wanted a piece of James Gunn. And so I'm going to let you and Greg take the filmmaking part of it. But for me, the thing that sticks out about this story is just, wow, what a beautiful way to see how, when you handle a bad situation with grace, and because he could have easily just fired off and been a complete, he could have said some really awful things in that moment, but he handled it with grace, and ultimately now he's quickly becoming one of the kings of Hollywood, and I say good for him.
And apparently we lost Greg. Greg, are you still with us, or is just your camera go off?
Oh, that thingy. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me guess. You use the Canon camera. The Canon camera turns off every 30 minutes.
I use the Canon.
But at least pulled an Aaron. Well, Greg, let me, and it's funny you mentioned that, Aaron, because he went from like the bottom of the barrel, like with the so publicly being shamed and being that, and now arguably you could make an argument he might be the most important director in the world of comic book films right now at this moment, and it's kind of funny what led him to this point. Anyway, Greg, you hear this report now. Walter Hamada is saying, oh yeah, he's going to be back. What do you think about this? Is James Gunn now doing, he did his Guardians 2, then he went over to DC to do Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, by the way. Now he's going back over to Marvel to do Guardians 3, then he's going to go back over to DC. I don't know. What do you make about it? I think it sounds great, but how are you feeling about it?
I feel like right when I saw the trailers for the Suicide Squad, it was incredibly apparent that he's probably going to have a much more involved ongoing relationship with DC more than Marvel moving forward, because he has been very open and vocal about how he's gotten all this creative freedom and liberties with the film. And a lot of times directors say that, but when you watch this movie, you're like, oh, he was not lying. They let him do whatever he wanted to do unapologetically, no restraints whatsoever. And when you can be able to do something so bizarre and weird, borderline ethereal, and that violent, it's like so madcap, and make it something great that people will respond to. he's really be able to do something where he doesn't have to answer to too many people to the point where it's tampering with his vision. Because I really feel like the Suicide Squad, way more than the Guardians, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, I really love the first one a lot. I don't feel like this movie is, some people will try to compare them automatically just because comic book movie, James Gunn, but I don't feel like it's like Guardians of the Galaxy. Comic book movie ensemble, but that's about as far as it goes for me in terms of being like Guardians of the Galaxy. This really is his own unique vision that you are going on a roller coaster ride for. So after experiencing this movie, as much as I love his involvement with Marvel, I actually am more excited about what he can bring to the table with DC moving forward. I like him, and I feel like he wants to. He's talked about a couple of times now of after Guardians 3, I'm probably done. He said that after Guardians 3, I'm probably done.
Yeah,
and he
I
seems
don't believe that. Just for the record, I don't believe that at all.
I don't know if he'll like continue the Guardians movies. I'm sure he'll be involved creatively somehow, but I feel like for films that he wants to like helm a lot more, I feel like it'll probably be the DC route. And like they just let him choose whatever character he wants, you know, like with Polka Dot Man. He said that he discovered this character from typing in who's the dumbest superhero, and he found Polka Dot Man. And then you watch the movie, and I'm like, Polka Dot Man's great in this.
Polka Dot Man's the shit. I love
awesome.
Polka Dot Man in this thing. Yeah.
And that actor, you know, like people often speculating about what could be another movie that James Gunn does within DC. And I talked to that actor. I always get his last name wrong, but it's like David Dastmalchian, and something like that. And he's worked with James Gunn a couple of times by this point. He's been in a lot of comic book movies. He's the guy in The Dark Knight who shoots Gordon, who he thinks he does. He's in Ant-Man. He's in the Gotham show. He's in the Flash show. He's in Batman. He's in some of the Batman animated stuff. But anyway, I even talked to him, and without giving like spoilers away at all for this movie, I want to keep everything a surprise. He was opening up to me about how was diagnosed with the disease vitiligo, which is like causes loss of skin color in patches. Now, without spoiling anything, you could see why this role was so personal for the actor when you watch the movie itself. And in the film, it introduces sort of a body horror element, and you don't really know what his journey was leading into being captured by Amanda Waller and being thrust into you don't know what led him there necessarily. So I was like, man, it'd be really cool for this guy to finally get his own like solo. He's doing a Peacemaker show with John Cena, but if he was able to do something that's like a body horror film with Polka Dot Man, that would be really cool and explore the traumatic roots with him. I was also thinking, like, I think James Gunn could nail a Swamp Thing movie. That's something they've been trying to do they've been trying to do that for years. And they even had a show that got canceled while it was airing. And it's like, I'm thinking about James Gunn's time when he did the movie Slither, which was so like gross.
Still my number one favorite James Gunn film. Still my favorite one of his.
It's brilliant soundtrack.
It's pure James Gunn, super fun, super violent, icky, gross, body horror, creature feature. And I'm like, dang, he would do the perfect Swamp Thing film. And so I want him to stick with DC so he could do stuff like that. And I feel like people would be so jazzed about him doing Swamp Thing, because so the Suicide Squad kind of has moments that hint at horror, and some are like just straight up horror. So I think if he was able to kind of throw his style, his sense of horror and bemusement into a Swamp Thing movie, I think that would be really cool. And I feel like for the first time they would finally nail Swamp Thing. So yeah, I would love him to stick with DC, and I'm excited about his future there.
The one thing that makes it feel like DC could be a little bit more of a natural home for him is the fact that, you know, Marvel is, with tremendous success and so great rationale, Marvel is going to stick in the PG-13 realm, with the exception of Deadpool, which Kevin Feige's already talked about that. And James Gunn, while he has crushed it with PG-13 with Guardians of the Galaxy, he's just more coming out of the trauma background and everything, he just seems more naturally comfortable in an environment where he can just go batshit crazy if he wants to. Like if he just wants to go completely nuts and really push the limits on things, and it just seems like a little bit more of a natural fit. Anyway, guys, the question is for you. What do you think about this? That James Gunn already has planned stuff to go back and do more with DC. I personally think that's very exciting. How do you guys feel about it? Jump on down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.